Are custom stamps on your must-make items with your Glowforge? If not, they should be, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to make them today. Hi, I'm Katie, and this is Things Katie Makes, where we talk about all things Glowforge so you can increase your confidence in making and lean into your creativity for your small business. I think custom stamps are such a great addition to any small business, especially a Glowforge run one where you can make them yourself. You can use your business logo on your packaging, even on the finished items that you're sending out, making sure that your branding shows up everywhere. I highly recommend every Glowforge small business owner has their own set of custom stamps and offer to your customers as well. I'm going to show you today how to do this both in the premium design software and Adobe Illustrator, starting with one SVG. You'll end up with a result like this. If you don't have the premium software, you will need to do this in another tool set, whether that's Adobe Illustrator, Inkscape, CorelDRAW, Silhouette Studio. There's a lot of different options, but you will need to prepare the SVG to be able to be used as a stamp if you aren't using the premium software, and I'll show you why. So let's get started. Let's talk about the materials we'll need for today's project. I've linked all of these materials below. The first thing that you need is the actual rubber stamp material. I like this gray one versus this orange one. While you may be used to seeing the orange one if you were to buy a stamp at the craft store, the orange one creates a lot more mess within the Glowforge. So I found that the results with the gray material are significantly better, especially in terms of cleanup. When you make your stamp, you have a lot of choices of what you might want to do with it after. You can mount it, say on something like a wood block.
I think these look great if you're making a custom stamp for a business because you can engrave the logo of the stamp on the back really simply.
You could also mount it to just a piece of acrylic. If you wanted to use this like a cling stamp with a clear acrylic block, you could do that.
What you'll need to do that is something like this Elmer's Craft Bond or Eileen's Tacky, and you want to use this in the way that makes it a temporary hold, not a permanent. So for this Craft Bond, you spray it on, let it dry for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can place it on the surface.
You also may want to have something like a foam padding, about 3 millimeters. Really what that allows you to do is put some cushion between the stamp and your block. So if you do mount this to a block, you may want a little bit of wiggle room so that when you're stamping down onto your ink pad, you don't necessarily get ink all over your stamp block, you just get it on the stamp. I like to mount my business stamps on wood blocks. To do that, I cut down my stamp, I attached it to the foam using the pre-sticky side, and then I attached the foam to the block using this E6000 spray. What I like about the E6000 is that you really get that nice thin layer bond so that your stamp can lay down nice and tight. It has a relatively quick dry time. Its strength is maximized at about between an hour and 5 hours with an overnight full cure, but really it bonds well to that wood. If you're going to bond something like that, you want to make sure that you sand down your block a little bit using a fine grit sandpaper just to give that material a little bit more space to adhere to. Right, that's all the supplies you need. So let's get started with the design, and then we'll come back at the end and I'll show you some of the differences in the engraving options and what you might want to think about if you're doing something for yourself versus something that you might sell.
I went ahead and uploaded this SVG from the Anti-Tay membership. I have a link in the description box to the membership if you're curious. So I loved this handmade SVG. I think this is a great example for a stamp and something that, knowing many of you are small business owners or are working towards building a small business, this might be something you would want to use. So first we're going to start with the sizing of this. I don't really want a stamp that's bigger than about 3 inches, knowing my packaging is quite small. So I'm going to start by transforming this using the ruler. I have a 3-inch square block that I want to be able to fit this stamp on. And I know that I'm going to need some spacing around that to make sure that this doesn't go right up to the edge. So I'm going to make sure that my largest size, which is my width, is 2.5 inches. Which should leave me some room. I can always resize this, but I like to have that sizing in place when I start with the stamp feature. Now that we're sized, we'll go ahead and make this into a stamp. So what this does is it needs to create the negative space for the stamp. So all the parts that you're seeing right now are the parts that we want to see raised in the stamp material. So this needs to inverse the image that we're seeing here, and that's what you'll see happen when I click the stamp maker. The padding will give us some room around the edge to make sure that when we place it on our block, we have some extra stamp material. The Keep Original Artwork option will allow you to have this same image that's here already stay. This is great if you want to go ahead and engrave what your stamp is on the back of your stamp, whatever you're mounting your stamp on, whether that's acrylic or wood, so you can keep this image to engrave it. I do like to add an edge. Adding an edge gives you a cut line. You can also cut stamp material quite easily just by using your scissors. It's quite thin once you're done with the engraving. So I like to add an edge just to have a really clean cut. We'll create our stamp. All right, so now you can see that we have our stamp sitting on top of our original image, and now you can see we have the negative space. So it's going to engrave all the way around. I'm gonna check the size just to make sure that I feel okay with this fitting. It's going to just fit, so I'm gonna make it 2.75. Actually 2.95, just to give myself a little bit of room on that edge. I've started with an artboard that is sized appropriately for the Glowforge. One thing you'll find when you design within Adobe Illustrator is that you want to have your artboard to be 19 inches by 11 or 10.9 inches so that you don't have any issues with things resizing when they go into the user interface. I'm going to go ahead and open the file that I'm using, the SVG, and then I will copy it into this artboard. So here is our SVG. I'm selecting the whole thing using Command C and then placing it in this artboard with Command V. I'm going to go ahead and resize this based on knowing how we wanted to size it before. So I'm going to use the transform function up here to make it 3 inches wide. Now this is a really simple thing to make into a stamp. What we need to do is we need to cut this out of a square. So I will make a square. I'm going to change the color of the square to be purple so we can see the cut out in it. And I'm going to make a square that is our 3 inches by 3 inches. Now I'll place that square on top of my image and I will send it to the back by using the arrange function. You can see I actually need to make it slightly larger or make my image slightly smaller, which I think I'll just make my image slightly smaller. So 2.75 inches. Now I select both of these and I will choose this function, which is the minus front function within the Pathfinder, and this will remove the image from the background square. I also know that I'm going to need to mirror this because when you place the stamp down, you need it to be facing the opposite direction, similar to what we saw with the stamp maker. So I will right click this, I will transform, I will reflect along the vertical axis 90 degrees. And that is ready to go. Now I can save this file, save as, so that I can get the SVG option. And you want to choose SVG 1.0 versus 1.1. You also want to make sure any images aren't embedded. You want to make sure that the responsive is not checked, and you should be good to go. All right, so my stamp is ready to go. I'm going to pull this off of my artboard because I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do that after. So I'm going to pull that off my artboard so that it'll be ignored. The other option is to just choose to ignore it within the Glowforge user interface. And now I need to get my material, my settings for my stamp. I've placed my stamp material into the bed of my laser. So this looks really dark now. But once I've made a stamp with the stamp maker, I get a new option in my engrave because it has changed it over to a raster instead of a vector. This is what I have tested and like the results of for my stamps. So my speed is 800, my power is 70. I'm using the convert to dots grayscale option versus the convert to patterns or the very power. I'm using 340 lines per inch and I'm taking 3 passes across this material. What you'll find when you're making stamps is that you need to get depth, and so making multiple passes is quite helpful in getting that to the level that you want it. So once you've chosen these settings that work for you, you can save them. so that you have them anytime that you want to make a stamp. One thing to note, stamps take a very long time, especially doing 3 passes at 340 lines per inch. So be prepared if you are going to make a stamp that you have some time set aside for your machine to run.
Stamp material is definitely one that you'll want to play around with and test what settings you like, especially if you plan to sell the stamps. There may be something that works functionally for the stamp, but you may not like the way that it looks for your customer. All right, let's look at the difference of these two stamps. This is the one that was created in Adobe Illustrator, and I did as an SVG. So I used the same settings on the Glowforge for this, but you can see that I got slightly finer, cleaner lines in here versus this one, which was done using the stamp feature. If I were to do this one again, I might do a few more lines per inch in my tests. Let me know in the comments what other materials you're curious about settings for, so we can plan for that in another video.
I want to go ahead and engrave the stamp on the back of the wooden stamp material. So I thought it might be helpful for me to put a square onto the block so that I can see if I am centering my stamp. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it will help a little bit. The material was slightly too large for the bed, so I needed to take my crumb tray out. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the focus on my machine before I finish centering this, because I wanna make sure that the size of my square matches to the size of my square. Great, so now you can see that my square matches. So you'll remember I had a block that was a 3x3 block, and I made a 3x3 square here so that I can center this, and then I can go ahead and center my image. So I will align their middles and their centers, and then I will group them so that I can turn this to look just right. Now again, this won't be perfect because I'm not using a jig, but it'll be pretty close. So that looks pretty good. So now I'm gonna check my engraving settings. Because I'm just using this as an identifier, I don't need this to be perfect. I'm not selling this. This is just for myself. So this is maybe a little more detail than I need. So I'm going to go down to 195 lines per inch. I'm going to speed that up to 700, and then I'll see what that gives me in terms of my print time. And the last thing that you need are your ink pads. I like this one from Hero Arts because it has the ombre color palette. So let's see the result. I also really like these Versamagic Dewdrop shapes. What's great about these is having that pointed tip. Instead of dipping your stamp into the ink, you can place the ink on the stamp how you like. So I can use multiple colors on the stamp without having to have an ombre pad, and I can get this result. Now that you have your stamp so that your product packaging can be on point, you need something to sell. I suggest you go watch this video that shows you a beginner keychain you can make in under 10 minutes using the premium design software. You could customize those and you'll have an item to sell right away. And if you enjoyed this video, it would really help me out if you liked and subscribed so you don't miss any of the content that I'm sharing with you on Tuesdays and Fridays.